Now we're reflecting on the weekend's GAA. So we had wins for Tyrone on Saturday in Croke Park and Dublin as well in the very first afternoon of Super 8 action. And then yesterday Monaghan beat Kildare in what was, to be fair, a pretty absorbing game across the weekend that wasn't so hot. And then we had Galway beating Kerry for the first time since 1965 whilst the World Cup final was playing out. We have Anthony Moyles and Enda McGinley on the line. How super were the Super 8s for you, Anthony?
Not too super, Joe, to be honest with you. I have a feeling it's going to become the Super 1 or maybe the Super 2, unfortunately. I don't think Croke Park really, it didn't lend itself to it very, very well. We saw previously, with the stuff around Newbridge or Nowhere the previous week, the atmosphere there. We saw the atmosphere, obviously, with the Roscommon Armagh game. We even saw the atmosphere, in the hurling yesterday. So you have a situation where I think we've spoken about this numerous times. Once you go into Croke Park and you have anything less than, kind of 50, 60,000, and if you throw anything like a one-sided game in on top of that, then you're in an atmosphere where you're in an environment where it's just absolutely, it's just not a spectator sport. There's no entertainment involved in it, and it's very, very hard to keep people's focus as a supporter. And even teams, it's amazing how teams nowadays, that when someone gets a run on them, it just becomes worse and worse and worse. And teams nearly kind of say, right, okay, to capitulate. And maybe this Super 8 thing is, which I felt certainly with Roscommon, it was like, okay, this game is done and dusted and we just move on to the next one.
And I do think these games will all have a completely different feel over the next two rounds. I certainly hope so anyway. Croke Park is a rotten place when you're talking, 30,000 yesterday? And actually there were never 30,000 in the ground at the one time either. I think a lot of Kildare and Monaghan fans headed for the bars to watch the World Cup final. I even feel sorry for the players when they're in that environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've noticed it over many years. I think for senior teams, the whole double header concept just doesn't work, particularly in Croke Park, but I think in any ground, because naturally, say if a minor game's on beforehand, people are coming in, you'll have some people there, you'll have more people coming in as the game comes in, and then there's the main event, and there's a natural build-up to the feeling that there's a main event coming. When it's two senior teams playing double headers, the supporters of the second game are only coming in halfway through and they're not really overly interested. The supporters of the first game then are leaving halfway through the second game. And the first game has the feel, no matter what, of a curtain raiser to the main event. And I don't think it sets it up and I've seen it over many, many years, that them double headers, the first game never quite catches fire, and then if the second game, as turned out at the weekend, both were poor, then it sort of leaves a really poor taste in the mouth. But yeah, Super 8s, I'd agree with you. I think the Sunday games with the weather conditions, hopefully, I'm sort of being an optimist here, hopefully that explains, the poor performances there. But there's a lot of pressure now on big teams, so we should be seeing performances and reactions from that. And there's other teams there that have one foot in the semi-final, and with one other big push, they can maybe make it there. So I think next week should be exciting. The third week has the risk of several teams being out already, and that's hardly going to be pushing towards great games.
Yeah, that's a fair point actually. So maybe this middle week is going to be the best one. If we start with the Kerry result, because maybe that's the most eye-catching one in most ways. 1965, Anthony, the last time that Galway beat Kerry, 113 to 110 in the end. It was put to Fitzmaurice afterwards that you have a bit of a safety net now, given that it's not straight knockout championship. He said a safety net going up to Clonus, fighting for your life, is a questionable safety net. So this was strange. I mean, I think everybody, when they saw how Cork bombed out of the championship post-Kerry, realised that we didn't know as much about Kerry as we might have thought. So there was always a question mark going in here. The striking thing was, though, that Galway didn't throw anything unexpected at them. Galway did what Galway have been doing for some time now. And Fitzmaurice, who is generally a very adaptable manager and not wedded to any one particular style, had ample time to prepare. And between what he threw together and what the players then delivered on the pitch, it was really very poor.
It was, and that's probably the worrying aspect of it, Joe. Like, in the first kind of 15, 20 minutes, it felt to me that Kerry were doing what Kerry would usually do, which is kind of feeling out the opposition, and I didn't think Galway were really offering anything majorly, kind of threatening going forward. they were a little bit toothless, as a matter of fact. There was a couple of kind of, really bad wides, bad shot selection. They weren't getting the right fellas on the ball. There didn't seem to be any discerning pattern of their play going forward, rather than they were just trying to stop and contain and frustrate Kerry. And I kind of felt, okay, it's just a matter of time now when they'll actually start to open their shoulders a bit. They'll start to put some moves together. But it never happened. And as a matter of fact, then Galway actually smelt blood and grew into the role, and they probably could have and should have won by a lot more. They hit, 2 or 3 really bad wides in a vital part of that second half. Now, they did tag on a couple of scores to stretch it out, but they could have been 5 or 6 ahead even before they got the goal. And I think they smelt blood. They realised, actually, we've put a physical challenge down here. Never mind the football challenge, but they put a physical challenge down. And, whereas on a dry day, during the Munster Championship, when they had Cork and they had Clare and they were able to play their football, there was no real ability. It wasn't a day for young lads yesterday, and I mean that in the sense of where they were getting tackled by 2 or 3 fellas. The ball was spilling. There was a little bit of afters. There was plenty of afters, actually. There wasn't too many Kerry lads who were kind of majorly standing up. And I think that's probably going to be the most disappointing aspect. He didn't, for me, have enough fellas who have that experience of being, where the bullying comes in, and you're either bullied or you do the bullying. And I felt yesterday that they were bullied a little bit, actually more than a little bit, by Galway. And then Galway realised, actually, do you know what? We can actually start to play a bit ourselves. And then all of a sudden, their fullbacks were coming up, their cornerbacks were joining attacks, and they really started to kick on and push on, and they grew into the challenge, and they grew into the game, and they won it absolutely deservedly. I think his main fault was the fact of, I think he also trusted the players on the pitch that they would turn it around. And, as you say, for a fella who would usually have a plan B and a plan C, It was quite worrying just to see him sticking to plan A for the whole period.
Yeah, of the young lads, I guess Clifford stood up with 1-4 from play, 1-5 in total. But I take your more general point. And again, that customary Kerry accuracy, their 6 first half wides easily could have been all put over the bar with a bit more composure. So it was a strange performance. Fitzmaurice said, and we didn't kill the ball. We were predictable up front. We weren't dynamic. We weren't accurate. He said, I thought our work rate was very good, especially in the first half, but our accuracy wasn't there. So I guess he's trying to write this off as a bit of an off day. But even, were Kerry trying to press the Galway kick out? Were they not trying to press them? What were Kerry actually trying to do was a question I had watching this game. Admittedly, with 1.5 eyes on the World Cup final.
Yeah, I think that for me is the biggest issue with Kerry. Of course, this can be just an off day. But I think if we look back and we can contrast it against a couple of the other teams that we've seen at the weekend. But if we look back now from the end of last summer to this year, Kerry seemed to have had 2 or 3, maybe even 4 different types of systems. When they were playing Mayo, they sort of changed it about quite a bit between one day and the next.
Yeah.
During the league, they were playing it a different way. And then yesterday, they were back to using a sweeper at times. And I think contrast that with Galway, who have been playing essentially the same way for a number of years, albeit with wee tweaks. Tyrone the same, Monaghan the same, Dublin essentially the same too. So Roscommon against Tyrone sort of tried to change their system too from what way they played against Armagh. And Kerry, for me, are sort of caught in no man's land. The kick out thing is part of that. For the most part, they seem to be putting on a high press. They seem to almost know more what to do for the Galway kick out than they did on their own kick out, which seemed to be a wee bit more of a mess. So Kerry just seem to be a team that Eamon Fitzmaurice has had lots of ways of playing them, but hasn't settled on one. And whenever you don't have your go-to style of play, I think in the modern game, when you're coming up against such well-drilled teams, then it falls apart. And unfortunately, as we were saying earlier on, Anthony was saying earlier on, that in the modern game, whenever a team starts to go ahead, they just accelerate further and further ahead. And I think that's what happened. Galway just pushed on ahead and Kerry had no answer then. Let's
bring in the Kildare Monaghan game then, because I guess the next line of questioning is about what happens next. So for Kildare, once again, it's a Newbridge or nowhere type scenario in a different sense, because they have Galway next weekend and then Kerry have to go up to Clonus Enda. So based on what we've seen thus far, how big a chance do you give Kerry up in Clonus? I mean, I would think they're pretty worried right now. Fitzmaurice must be scratching his head a little bit here.
Absolutely. And the Kerry Monaghan game is absolutely massive. If we think about some of the just where them two teams are at the minute, Monaghan know that they're a great league team. They are great in these sort of smaller grounds. They're great in these more sort of regular games. That's their forte. They have really struggled in the quarterfinal, big knockout games in the quarterfinal championship over many, many years. When they should have made a semi-final by now, they have routinely failed at this quarterfinal hurdle. Yet this weekend coming, they have a chance on their home pitch in Clonus to take that step into the Ireland semi-final. Like, that's an unbelievable chance for Monaghan. Kerry are going to be coming up there, coming into the Lions Den. Monaghan are going to be like men at war in that match. I have no doubt. Like, Monaghan have this monkey on the back of not being able to make that semi-final berth. Malik O'Rourke has had it put to them. The players have had it put to them that they never are good enough. They're good, but they're not good enough ever to make that big step to the semi-final. And here they are playing on their home pitch in Clonus against Kerry, and it's a wounded Kerry. And again, it's a Kerry that's not. I don't see a Kerry that's sure of what they're at the minute as a team. So it's a huge chance for Monaghan, and that's a massive game for Kerry, an absolutely massive game for Kerry. And I almost am suspecting that Monaghan could win, and if that's the case, Kerry's gone, which is unbelievable, really.
Yeah, and Fitzmaurice is in big trouble then. How do you see it going up in Clonus, Anthony? Because, I mean, we're all expecting that kind of tribal, primitive cauldron type atmosphere anyway.
Well, it's absolutely going to be that, Joe. And as Enda said, you know, the worst team possibly, like, I mean, you actually look at both sides of it. Kildare are going to have that is a really tough ask to get Galway into Newbridge, regardless of that they're at home. And then on the flip side, obviously this one, because Monaghan will give it to you any way you want it. They have got enough good hardened backs in there that'll scare the living daylights out of fellas if they need to. They'll keep it tight. They'll make you absolutely earn every score you get. They won't be pulled left and right. They'll keep it nice and tight down the middle, like Galway were trying to do. They'll let you out on the left, they'll let you out wide right, they'll let you have the ball out there, and then they'll look to break. And in McManus they have fellas, and to be fair, they've got other individuals now who are all chipping in with scores and coming in with big scores, who are helping him out at the right and the opportune time. So you've got a situation where that is a really, really tricky situation for Fitzmaurice. Like, does he go with the old tried and tested? Does he spring Donaghy? Does he bring in a couple of other fellas? Does he try to change it up? Does he bring a bit more maturity in there, a bit more physicality in there?
Yeah.
I think he's going to have to, because the first battle that's going to have to be won up there is the physical battle, and it's the battle of, you know, who wants this more, and that is literally going to be it. Because if Monaghan smell that again, like Galway did, that you know, that there's Kerry fellas maybe a little, not shirking away from it, but just that they haven't yet come up against this type of intensity in a situation like up in Clonus, well then they will absolutely be just reveling in that.
Yeah.
And I think it's you know, it's again, to look at the performance, it just shows you, I suppose that is the one thing about the Super 8, is that the slip in the first game puts you under enormous pressure.
Yeah, it does.
And that's what has proved for both Kildare and indeed for Kerry, obviously.
And not much room during the week to work on much in the training pitch. It's about recovery more than anything. A word on Kildare then, Anthony. I mean, I have to say that was like actually maybe the best game of the four. Like, it was, and I don't mean as a euphemism, it was like a very absorbing second half. It wasn't thrilling, but it was very, very absorbing. It was on a knife edge. When Kildare really cut that second half gap, when they kind of pierced that bubble and got into, you know, a point or two or even close to level with Monaghan, they then, at the crucial stage in that second half, just had a glut of wides, or they hit the post as well. I think it was maybe even 4 in a row, and then Monaghan pop up and they're more clinical and they score 2 nice points, and again, Kildare behind the 8 ball. Yeah,
and it was that, Joe. It took them the first half to realise. Like, the funny thing about Kildare, and I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, I didn't fear Kildare playing Mayo because Mayo will play football with you. The fear for a lot of Leinster teams has been, bar Dublin, has been that when you come up against a defence, you know, a structured defence, shall we say. So, you know, be it like Tyrone or be it like Monaghan or most of the Ulster teams, you know, except maybe say Armagh, but someone who's going to say kind of look to frustrate you and then counter-attack you. And the Kildare, you know, struggled in that first half. They were trying to kick the ball. Wet conditions, you know, more than likely not of skidding off the surface. Croke Park is like an ice rink when it rains in there. It is unbelievably slippy. The fellas were sliding all over the place. The ball was skidding away. All of that stuff. So it took them 35 odd minutes to realise, actually, we have to carry this ball and carry it at.
And sorry to interrupt, Anthony.
Yeah.
They did that brilliantly. Their lines of running against Fermanagh were brilliant, which I think probably gave Kildare fans a sense of hope that they might be able to cut through Monaghan, but they weren't able to.
No, they weren't, but they also did, Joe, they kind of, in the second half and for a lot of that period, they trucked it down the middle an awful lot, you know, and again, you're dealing with Monaghan are well set for that, and they've got some big physical players. And when you have a wet ball like that, all you need, like the amount of dispossessions that happened in the tackle, you know, so a guy was running in, he didn't have full control of the ball, and bang, a tackle would come in with a fist across the chest and the ball would be spilled. Yeah. And Monaghan were nearly lying in wait for that, if you get me. You know, when they started to try to get fellas around on the loop and taking scores, they started to impress me, and they really came into it in that second half. It was, as you say, I think a pity, because you saw O'Neill at the end. He kind of, when the whistle blew, you could see him. He kind of, you know, he looked as if he said, "Well, that was one that slipped away from him." And I really felt it was. It was a great arm wrestle, and not to take anything away from Monaghan, because they were fully deserved. When they needed to get those vital scores, they did get those vital scores, and that's why they're such a dangerous team. And like, I mean, you look at some of the fellas on that team who have just been there for, you know, it seems like donkey's years now. You know, like, I mean, Desi Moan comes on. You've Vinnie Curry. You've these lads, like, and they're just, you know, it's endless, you know, and I think, you know, so much is being said about, you know, the panel and the fact that there's very little rotation, and it's absolute testament to them. It really is, and you know what, it'd be great to see them going and actually breaking that hoodoo and getting into a semi-final, because as a group of players and a panel of players, they deserve it. Yeah.
So next week it shapes up lovely in that group. Kildare Galway is on in Newbridge 2:00 on the Sunday, and then Monaghan Kerry and Clonus at 4. On the Saturday, we're going to have Tyrone against Dublin in Healy Park, 7:00, which I think everybody can't wait for already. And before that, Roscommon, Donegal in the Hyde at 5. Tyrone put 4.24 on Roscommon. And I know you and David Brady were on last week. David Brady tipped Roscommon actually to win that game, and you felt it would be tight. You thought Tyrone would come out on top. Kevin McStay said, "We genuinely thought these days were gone." And obviously they're not. We've so much more to do. For Tyrone, that is an average of 24 points per game this season. So, like, pretty soon, not just yet, but pretty soon, I'm going to have to admit, you're not just defensive trollers, effectively, pulling the people's jerseys and saying bad things into people's ears.
It's these labels, I suppose, bandied about, and I still, as I describe Tyrone as a defensive team. Why? Because whenever Tyrone lose possession, 4 or 5 players immediately run back into defence. You can choose your word. It's either a defensive team or a counter-attacking team, but everybody knows exactly what we're describing. They are exceptionally solid and a packed defence, and from there they spring attacks. And when they come up against an opposition that plays into their hands, as they have done this last couple of games, they just rack up massive scores. Like 4-24 in an Ireland quarter-final is mental scoring. Yeah. It'll be brilliant for them. For me, one of the biggest things they've been trying all league, from last year's annihilation to Dublin, the big thing has been trying to find a plan B, sort of a ball into the full forward line that's not reliant on the running out of defence and playing it through the hands. In the league, they tried Matty Donnelly in there for a while. They tried McCalliskey and Bradley in there for a while. They're trying Richie Donnelly in there for the past 3-4 games, and in the second half, particularly again Roscommon, that really started to click into gear, and it gave Tyrone a big dynamic. Now, the caveat to all of this is, of course, how bad Roscommon were. Like they just were like lost souls out in that pitch. They had no match for Tyrone's speed. They had no match for Tyrone's physicality. They had no match for Tyrone's just footballing ability. Tyrone were at a complete level above them and put them to the sword in pretty ruthless manner. But they did manage to use their full forward line much more effectively than I've seen in any other game this year. Was that because of the level of opposition they were playing? If it wasn't, and if they can pull that type of play off against Dublin, then I think it does give them a real chance in the bigger games. But like, the players were cautious afterwards. Mickey was cautious afterwards, because they were hammering teams, and they ran up record scores in Ulster and winning the Ulster title last year. Then they went on and annihilated Armagh in the Ireland quarter-final last year. So they had similar scoring averages last year until the semi-final against Dublin, and then it all fell apart, obviously. So Tyrone know that their style of game can destroy teams, and that's what we've seen this past couple of weeks. What they don't know, and what we're all waiting to find out, is can it take down the Dubs? It didn't last year. It's been tweaked slightly this year. I don't think there's been any massive change, and Mickey didn't say there was going to be a massive change, and I think that's true. But has it changed enough to take on Dublin?
Yeah. Last year, Anthony, if you remember, in the build-up to that Dublin-Tyrone game, people really did give Tyrone a good chance of putting it up to Dublin, and just the air went out of the game within about 10 minutes. Actually, I think we were at that game together. I think you were there, and we after 10 minutes it was done. It just felt over, and Dublin were only ahead by about 2 or 3 points, and it seemed like it was done. Dublin had been described as business-like, underwhelming against Donegal. Conor Callaghan, Kieran Kilkenny, Paul Mannion, none of these guys had standout games. McCaffrey and Keane O'Sullivan made their first starts at the championship. You're still missing the likes of Diarmuid Connolly in there, and I guess Bernard Brogan as well. Gavin described it as just one of those days. Has the gap narrowed, and you can include the fact that this is at Healy Park now, has the gap narrowed to the point where we think that Tyrone Dublin Part 2 here might be something special?
Oh, I hope it is, Joe. Like, I mean, if you remember last year, we built that one up as well. We were both really looking forward to it. That, and just, as you say, after 5 minutes, it was like, okay, this is over.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think Tyrone, as Enda says, will have learned an awful lot from that. And obviously the learnings has brought in, what they're trying to do throughout the league, and Donnelly at full forward and stuff. But the one big difference is, and I watched back the Roscommon game, and I watched back some of the main things. Like, I mean, it was close enough, and then it was an absolute killer of a goal just before half-time. And if you watch just some of the tracking by some of the Roscommon players, it was like, I mean, McStay will watch the video and he'll just be absolutely tearing his hair out. And if you go back to Roscommon Armagh, very high scoring game. It's kind of like you score, we score, you score, we score, both kind of counter attacking each other, very free flowing. And then all of a sudden they come up against Tyrone, who are saying, well, actually, we're not going to let you score, but if you let us score, we'll score all day, which is what happened. And then you had Hart bemoaning the fact that they actually conceded so much. So you can hear what he's trying to say. He's trying to say, well, we can't concede that. We can't give up that kind of level against Dublin, because Dublin will not let you do that type of scoring. There was a cameo little thing during the Donegal game. I don't know if you remember it, but it was one of those classic Donegal moves, which was a kick out. I think Ryan McHugh came off on a break. The ball broke to him. He came at unbelievable place. I think one of the Brennans was involved. There was a couple of hand passes, and it should have been back of the net all day. It just was absolutely pitch perfect, except the chasing back by the Dublin half-back line and midfielders was absolutely phenomenal. They went... Like they ran, no one ever hesitated. No, they recognized it straight away, and they said, "Oh, we've been caught like this before." And they were so well tuned that they knew exactly where to get back to. And I think Donegal ended up with a point, which was all they got out of it. And it was at a vital stage of the game. And I remember just thinking to myself, any other team would have conceded a goal there. It was so well worked. It was absolutely pitch. It was like everything was moving in tandem. It should have been a goal, except for the fact that Dublin's kind of will and determination and obviously organisation got them back in there. So that is what Tyrone are going to come up against. They're going to come up against a team who, as Enda says, has been there, done that, and who not only will, absolutely annihilate you with their own skill and their own effectiveness and their own setup, but when it comes down to determination, working back, like, I mean, look at the fellas they had in the pitch the other day. We didn't even hear these fellas last year. Like, I mean, Brian Howard comes in, he starts plucking balls out of the sky like he's been in, playing midfield for decades, Then you had, just Scully. Scully is on the end of everything, making things tick. So all of a sudden, when you think you've solved one problem and you say, okay, we've got this guy's number, someone like these fellas just pop up and you're like, oh, okay, well, he's a completely different paradigm. He's a completely different, problem that we never thought we'd face, and now we have to look after him. And I think they're with the way they use the pitch, the way they come in at the right time, like for forward play, it is unbelievable to watch how, they keep to their zones. They don't come in on top of each other. They keep the D absolutely, completely free. If you watch back the game, they never ever go into the scoring area unless they're going in to either A, collect the ball, or are running in there with the ball. Yeah. They never crowd it out. So if you're a team that want to crowd that, such as Tyrone, you're going to find that very, very difficult, because you're just going to be in there with yourself. You're not going to have any Dublin players in there. Yeah. Now, Oma will help a bit, because it'll obviously be a little bit tighter, but I think it's going to be a fascinating game. I really, really hope it's going to live up to the billing, because I think it's going to be the game, obviously, of the Super 8s so far. And
in short, in a word, you're still going for Dublin?
I just think again, Joe, I just think it is. I think Tyrone have massively improved. I really do. And I watched them all through the league, and I remember Enda was on, and we said, I think they've unearthed a few really good players, really good leaders. They won't lie down like they did last year. Absolutely not, and I think they will make it a very, very tight. But I think Dublin will get out of there by a couple of points.
The other consistent point actually from the Donegal game, and I know we haven't talked too much about Donegal. We'll do that at another time. The clock's against us, but as usual, the Dublin kick-out stats are just beautiful. So they won 23 of their 25 kick-outs. Donegal lost 10 of their 25 kick-outs. Dublin have an ability to put the opposition under pressure, kick-outs at both ends, which is probably a starting point to beating them, and that's something that Tyrone will have to do. But Enda, I'll give final word to you on Anthony's point, and that was the striking thing last year, is that Dublin don't go into those scoring zones. They kind of they've whitewash on their boots. They stay outside and they're very patient and they pick their moments to go in. And it looked like Tyrone weren't putting them under pressure last year, weren't engaging with the man on the ball. So does Oma lend itself to them getting in Dublin faces a bit more, or will they take a different approach to stopping Dublin scoring? And again, that's not to mention them scoring. So talk to us about this in a minute or two if you can.
Yeah, I think you've hit, for me as a Tyrone person and last year's a Tyrone fan, the worst thing about that All-Ireland semi-final, and I was speaking to Racey McMenamin afterwards and we were just chatting, and we were saying, like, them Dublin players will be waking up tomorrow morning without a sore on them. And now that sounds as if there's typical Tyrone men just want to go out.
Mask has slipped once again.
But Anthony would vouch for there. Any senior player, when you wake up the next morning after a championship, your body should be sore. It's supposed to be hard, competitive contact sport. Last year's All-Ireland semi-final was essentially non-contact. Tyrone did not lay upon them. Now that was Dublin. Obviously their tactic was not to go into contact, not to play into Tyrone's hands, and so they played out and around and picked their spaces. So for me, Tyrone have to man up. They have to go and find a way of going toe-to-toe and unsettling Dublin. That's what Mayo done last year's All-Ireland final, and it unsettles Dublin. It has to. But that takes a massive effort, because the other thing, and you were absolutely right in saying, Dublin's work rate and Dublin's physicality and Dublin's competitiveness is off the scale. And that, as much as they're talented as footballers, is why they're the team that they are. So Tyrone have to man up. Somehow the blanket defence doesn't lend itself to going into contact, because you're all sitting back, and so Dublin get so much time on the ball without contact. But in some way, Tyrone need to try to put a bit more press on it. Otherwise, I think this game could be a classic, but equally we could have two really disciplined teams playing really patient football, and them words of disciplined and patience in the modern game just usually means boring, to be honest. And that's my fear. Like, I sort of look at the Super 8s and I'm sort of thinking football's at a critical juncture. If, whenever we're playing the top teams off against each other, we don't get great stuff, then there's something wrong with the game itself. And again, last weekend wasn't exactly great evidence, to be fair. So this weekend with Tyrone, Dublin, Kerry, Monaghan, them sorts of games, if they don't become classic games, and it's not up to the teams have to go out there and win it. Whatever way they have to win it, that's up to them. They don't have to play it any sort of way by my book. But from a bigger point of view, from an overarching sort of looking at how the game is going point of view, a lot rests on this weekend's games for me. Yeah,
I think you're right, given the weekend we've had and given the fact we'll have dud games in round 3. So here's hoping for some classic games, because Lord knows we're all sick of hurling people telling us how good their game is all the time. I mean, that's the one thing we can agree on. Anthony Moyles and Enda McGinley, thanks so much, lads.
Cheers, Joe.
Thanks.